Hello and welcome to the Herdline Podcast, hosted by Trace Johnson and the Herds Headset. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode where the Headset and Trace talk all things Marshall athletics. Be sure to follow us on X and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Now, sit back, relax, and let's talk the herd.
Welcome back to the Herdline Podcast. Trace and the Herds Headset with you as we get ready to dive into. We've moved on now from football, looking back at the football coaches. We've had that was a tremendous set of podcasts for us. You know, it opened up so many opportunities to talk to coaches and things like that. So that was an amazing time there, getting all those done and what came out of it. And now we're going to switch over to the hard ball, the hard court, whatever you want to look at side of things, because we are starting with Marshall basketball today. And we're going to start with not obviously Corny Jackson because he's still in the middle of his tenure, but we're going to start with the guy that came right before him, Dan D'Antoni. And there's a lot to talk about with his tenure. I mean, he just simply is one of the most beloved Marshall figures of all time. We're going to get way into that. And we're also going to go over a few house cleaning kind of things here. We'll go over some things that's been going on with Marshall athletics, not anything that's going to take too much time, but we're going to start with some of that stuff, just some of the stuff that we feel like we need to talk about and just get out there. But before we do that, man, how's it been going?
Been good. And, like you said, we're going to be talking about a very polarizing person. No matter how you look at it, I know some people towards the end of his tenure were kind of excited for him to leave and be in D'Antoni. I was not of that opinion, but, back whenever he began his tenure here, he's the reason I think that I really solidified my Marshall fandom because, Marshall football was still good. They were never been bad necessarily, but really just his teams and different things. I was more of a basketball fan once upon a time than I was a football fan, which is something that if you told me now, I would be like, that's just sounds weird. Doesn't sound right. I'm more of a football fan than I am anything else now.
Yeah.
But D'Antoni truly was one of those guys that he's just, again, one of the best to ever do it here. I'm excited to talk about him. It should be a fantastic episode.
No doubt about it. There's a lot to talk about with his tenure, a lot of good, some bad, a lot of things in between. I mean, we got a lot to unpack. I mean, you're talking about 10 years as the head coach, and we've not had, like you said, we've not had coaches very long. That we haven't had any coaches in very many sports ever that have lasted 10 plus years. So we got a lot to talk about. But before we get into the Dan D'Antoni era, we're going to start with a few news that's reports and things that came out over the last week or so. Just a few things we wanted to talk about before we get started with too much here. But one of the things that I have wrote down here that I wanted to bring up was the fact that our swim and dive coach, Ian Walsh, has resigned after, I believe, 8 years with the program. So that's kind of interesting timing, given the fact that they just saved the program and all that. So that's interesting. That's an interesting little talking point there, I think. Looking at something else that just came out today, which I think is a very cool opportunity. I didn't write these down in any kind of order. I just wrote them down randomly. The Huntington and Spring Valley 2-year agreement to play at the Joan is very cool. I think that game will draw big fans, high school fans. It's going to be at the Joan in 2026 and 2027. First game being in September September 11th of this year. Huntington and Spring Valley is a big-time rivalry game in high school football in West Virginia, so that's going to draw a lot of fans. I think that's very cool to open up the Joan for that kind of thing. So we'll see. I think that'll be a cool opportunity for obviously those teams and those schools in Marshall. I think will be good too. And then another big one here, and this one is, it goes without saying that they had to do it. Morgan Zirkle extended through 2030. I mean, that's as easy as a no-brainer as you're going to find anywhere. I mean, that was the same thing like when Julie Falks got extended, like no-brainer, have to do it. You would have been foolish to not do it. So awesome to see Coach Zirkle stay with the Herd through at least 2030. She's just a rising superstar in the industry. She just is. And we got her where she needs to be, and she's doing great things for our program. So great thing there. The first ever Marshall stunt coach was hired as well. Her name is Evan. I believe it's Evan. I might be pronouncing the first name wrong. Richard. That's a cool opportunity. I mean, that's going to be interesting to see the balance that they have to do now. With swim and dive and stunt, because obviously we know all the drama that came there. So great opportunity there for Coach Richard to make a name for herself and get the stunt program off and running. So cool thing there. Couple portal news reports about baseball. Griffin Miller, who missed most of this year, actually pretty much all of the year, who was the second team all Sun Belt performer in 2025. He entered the portal, as well as Evan Batone, who had a very good year this year in 26. He entered the portal. We kind of imagined some of that was going to go on. So a couple big losses there. We'll have to see what they can do to replace those guys. And then the last set of news I wanted to talk about is a few enhancements coming to Joan C. Edwards Stadium for 2026. Chick-fil-A. That's all you've got to say. That's it. Chick-fil-A. The fact that you're going to be able to go to the Joan on game day and get some Chick-fil-A is friggin' boss. I don't care what you say. And I know there was a nice little spirited debate on the old X app there between a couple guys. I won't mention their names, but they were talking about that. And and despite the fact that it's not my actual favorite chicken, but I love it. I love it at every turn. So I'm happy to have Chick-fil-A at the Joan as well. Another thing is an interactive 3D map. I don't really know what that entails exactly, but I guess it's just a better way to be able to get around the Joan. It'd be cool to see that, because that just seems like a nice modern thing to have. And then also it says additional fan experience upgrades. That's kind of vague, but that's encouraging. We've had Gerald Harrison on here, and he's talked about a lot of that stuff. Trying to enhance the Joan, make it a funner place to be, make it a party. He's talked about all that stuff with us. So any of that stuff I've talked about, wherever you want to go with it, you can go ahead and add whatever you want to add with whatever I said. But you can take off from here.
Yeah, well, to piggyback off what you talked about last there, the overall improvements that have been made to the Joan that are in the process of it. I mean, that's all exciting stuff. One thing I saw that just made me so happy was the open concourse, those gates and things that have just kind of plagued. That basically was the old concourse. Harrison, he put a picture on social media just the other day of that just being gone. Like, it was just all open to where the fences and stuff is now. So that's a fantastic idea. The fact that hasn't been done sooner, or we didn't open those gates earlier, I don't understand, but it sounds and it looks like, they're going to go in that direction. And that really opens up a lot of different things. Number one, feels like you can breathe again. When you're down there and people are getting to their seats, or it's halftime or whatever, it can be very claustrophobic.
Yeah.
So opening that up, that's a big deal. And it really could feel claustrophobic these last couple of seasons whenever they added in the food trucks, because now you had lines that were bottlenecked through just one entry point, both on the outside of the concourse and on the inside of the concourse. So that was really something that I appreciated and saw, and I was like, man, that's just a really good idea. He also put on that they're refurbishing the premium areas, which, common folks such as us may never see, but still pretty cool nonetheless. And they're power washing, the seats and different things. So we all might be really surprised. Like the chairback seats that are on the home side, they might actually be Kelly Green, which would be crazy, which is something that he's talked about. I don't know. He's probably trying this year to see what it looks like. And then if that didn't work, he might. I would not be shocked, and don't be surprised if next year you see him just repaint those seats Kelly Green. Because I agree with him, you've got to make sure that you get all of your greens to match up, because this is not 2002 anymore. It's time to, make it look all like it belongs in the same era. So, that's good stuff. And then it's all exciting stuff overall, just little things that we're seeing. And I think that he's definitely forward thinking, and he's got a lot of good things in mind. I'm also seeing on his social media posts and just different places all around, we've talked about this before too, the need and the desire to retire number 88.
Yeah.
And of course, that being for Randy Moss and whatnot. And so we'll see if there's any traction with that. But I certainly would not be mad at that. By any means necessary, to see number 88 on the press box there with number 72. And really just one more thing too that I saw here recently in regards to Marshall, and not even necessarily sports, but just the university kind of exciting stuff. I had seen where Marshall is trying to now buy 2 more blocks right past the Hal Greer Boulevard on the side like you're heading towards Huntington. and they're trying to buy up some land there and then kind of really do what they've been doing with the new cybersecurity place and whatnot. Just kind of add on to campus, which is a huge deal. We have seen so much campus expansion within the last 5 years, and that goes back to just the leadership under Brad Smith. He really understands what it takes to take a university to the next level. And so, I'm very excited to see what they decide to do with all of that, how that's going to bring in more kids and enrollment go up and more money come in. That means better facilities, more money going around. That means better results on the field. So, all this stuff works together and it's exciting. And so, Marshall's in a good spot. I'm excited to see how all of that turns out. And for the short term, I'm really excited for just football to return. And I can't wait to get to the Joan. I can't wait to see the new lights. I can't wait to see some of these little improvements. It's like Christmas morning, the first home game, because they always do like little stuff. And somebody that's been going for years, it's just like so cool to see those little things. And I just really appreciate all the little details that go into this kind of stuff. Hopefully one day soon too, we'll see a bathroom renovation. What a great idea that is. And so we will see if we'll ever get that. It's almost to a point though where, you almost hate to see it go, the troughs and whatnot.
Yeah.
That would definitely be the end of an era, but still, really cool, really exciting stuff going on, really all over the place.
Yeah, you're right. About the troughs, man, it's like you don't know what you've got until it's gone type deal. I mean, I'm not saying that they're going to be necessarily missed, but there's definitely going to be a hint of nostalgia there, for a lot of people. I mean, especially if they've been going since like the stadium opened and they've been there since then. Like, that they're going, I remember when Willie Merrick made that kick and I was in the bathroom there, like people are going to be like telling weird stories about whatever. So,
I'll tell you what, Trace, whenever they get those things out of there one day, and it's going to happen, I'm going to write a letter to Mr. Harrison and I'm going to ask him, if you could be able to have one of those troughs, maybe you can put that in your man cave in your house.
Oh my gosh, that'd be incredible. The house would stink to high heaven. That'd be hilarious. But it's funny. It's funny you brought that up though, because I mean, if you remember his podcast, he talked about those. He talked about the bathroom. So it's going to happen. It's just a matter of, it might not be this year, next year. But it's going to happen. I'm pretty confident in it. And I'm very confident that he's going to get all the greens right. The old dingy hunter green's going to be going. It's going. I mean, heck, if you want to get really technical, you need to change the green on the press box too, because it's an old green too. So make that a little more vibrant. I love our leadership. We talked about it many times. Our leadership right now is top notch. Brad Smith just gets it. He knows how to build it, grow it, expand it. Gerald Harrison knows the ins and outs of what you need to do for the athletic department to make just appearance. TLC, just a little bit of TLC goes a long, long way. And yeah, there's been times where that always hasn't happened. It hasn't always been the case. But in the last few years, even since Mike Hammer, we've been pretty lucky and fortunate to have really good TLC with our buildings and things. But I think now it's going to just get even better. So exciting stuff for sure there. I can't wait to see what they do. But with that being said, man, it's time to start getting into the nitty gritty here of the episode. We're talking about our very first basketball coach that we're gonna look into, Dan D'Antoni. We're gonna go back as far as we can go, like we did with football. I gotta do some research on a lot of the older coaches, but we'll get there. But we got to start with the man that really put in the modern era, really put Marshall basketball on the map again, no doubt about it. Dan D'Antoni. I mean, even before he came back to Marshall, be the head coach, just a beloved figure for Marshall history, just a legend for Marshall history. He just is. Class of 1970. For Marshall. He was a phenomenal player for Marshall in the late 60s. Absolutely phenomenal player. Helped lead the Herd to NIT appearances in 1967 and 68. And this is when the NIT was as big, if not even bigger than the NCAA. So this was a big time. He was the head coach of the Marshall freshman team after he graduated from Marshall. And then he was also an assistant on the varsity team after that. And then for 30 years. He was the head coach at Saukastee High School in Myrtle Beach, over 500 career wins, Marshall Coach of the Year honors, founded the Beach Ball Classic, which brought in some of the best up-and-coming talent that you'll find around the country. It's just one of the most prestigious high school tournaments out there. And going back to looking at those years where he played for the Herd, the 66-67 Marshall team went to the NIT semifinals. And again, that was a big deal at that point because I think it was as big, it was as important as the NCAA tournament. The NCAA tournament really hadn't got its luster quite yet. And the NIT was a big deal. So that was a huge run that they went on. He led the tournament. He led the entire NIT in assists in that year, the 67 season. He was an all-MAC first-teamer in 1968-69, 1,109 career points. He was in the Marshall Athletics Hall of Fame in 1990, and then, of course, an NBA assistant for numerous years under Mike D'Antoni. He was an assistant for the Suns, the Knicks, the Lakers, and he was also the head coach of the Knicks and Lakers Summer League teams. So, before he even got back to Marshall, like that's a resume right there. I mean, he had been all over at every different level, had coached, played, whatever you want to look at. He hadn't been a head coach, like a college head coach or an NBA head coach, obviously, but he had coached so many NBA players had nothing but great things to say about him, all the development that they had under Dan D'Antoni. I mean, he just knows his stuff. He knows basketball like the back of his hand. And on April 24th, 2014, he was hired at Marshall, officially replacing Tom Harrigan, who had been, well, I guess he technically resigned a few weeks before that. And if you remember, there was a lot of drama around that search. I remember there was so many people putting out names about who was going to be the coach, and then it ended up being, Dan D'Antoni. And I know there was a lot of talk about that they wanted Mike as well at that point. So it was, I remember the introductory presser that Mike Hamrick was talking for Dan, and he said that there were two people offered the job, and they both had the same last name. So they would have been happy either way. And, he did it was a really good hire. It was a great hire from the start, despite some of if you remember that infamous tweet, I don't remember even who put it out now, but it was saying that the Conference USA coaches were texting the dude because they were giddy, because they were so excited that Marshall was going to suck because Dan D'Antoni was hired. Well, they kind of Marshall got the last laugh there, I would say, but we'll get into all that. But before we talk about these year-by-year results, what about the hiring of Dan D'Antoni? I mean, I remember it. So what did you think about it? What kind of expectation did you have when he was hired?
Well, like you said, I mean, he's got a resume that speaks for itself. And I recall all the drama with all the other Conference USA coaches that were saying, oh, yeah, this is great. D'Antoni won't do nothing. He's just some high school coach. But I don't know. It was very strange to me, just kind of not even necessarily being a fan, just being somebody that just appreciated basketball. Like, why would you be excited about a guy who, right, yeah, he's a high school coach, but it was high-level high school number one. But more importantly, man, this guy been almost all over the place in the NBA. I mean, he coached some of the all-time greats, Steve Nash, different people like that, like Amari Stoudemire. And so he was around some all-time great teams, and all-time great players, helped develop them and different things like that. So, I don't know. I never understood that one, and it makes me even happier to this day to know that they were all incredibly wrong. Like, I mean, they just were flat out wrong, not even close to being right. And but I do remember, the opening presser and really my dad too, because my dad was around the era where D'Antoni actually was playing. He was a kid whenever D'Antoni was running up and down the floors. And so he would go and he would watch them play in the old field house. He'd tell me all the stories about really all the stuff that you've heard D'Antoni say. Like, the crowd would fill that place up like it was wild. And they'd chant, "Bring on the Herd." And they were one of the best basketball programs in the entire country back in those days. And so seeing him come back, I know one thing, my dad was excited. And because he was excited, I was too. I was like, oh, man, hey, maybe this guy's going to get us to a place that we've never been before. And that's exactly what would end up happening eventually. And just the overall, the biggest thing that stood out to me about D'Antoni whenever he took the job here, that we saw him do and that we will never see anybody else in the entire history of our university, doesn't matter where you're at, what even sport you're coaching in. Somebody asked him, how much you getting paid? He said, I don't even know. Like, I don't care. I don't need the money. I'm not here to get a paycheck. I'm not here to make a name for myself. I'm here for one reason, and that is because I love this university. It gave me my start, and it gave me the opportunity to go around all over the world and coach basketball and be with all these all-time great players. And so because of that, I want to invest back into this place that gave me all of those things. And so that was enough for me as a fan, a young fan at the time, just still in high school. I was like, man, that's just different. You don't hear that with just any old person. And so I instantly was just, I said, man, I really, really, really am rooting for this guy. And I was hoping that he would have a lot of success. And it was a great day to see him hired, a great day to see the raw emotion from that first presser. I mean, he shed tears, and just it was just a great moment, a great, great day as a Herd fan, seeing him hired.
No doubt about it. And like you said, I mean, you could tell how much it meant to him. He wanted to get back. He talked about a couple guys that were, people that were in the crash and that he was close with. And he said that like eventually that they wanted him to become the head coach of Marshall. And like, it was just a whole thing. I mean, it's a full circle thing. Just awesome to hear it. I mean, he's a West Virginian as well. He knows, he gets it. This whole thing, the whole wherever he was coaching at Marshall, the whole thing, he gets it. So he despite some of the people that thought it was going to be a bad hire. Yeah, I never thought it was going to be a bad hire at all. I mean, I don't know why they assumed that, but it turned out to be a very good hire for Marshall. And we're going to get into these year by years because let's be honest, at first, when he first took over, talent was pretty low. The cupboard was pretty bare. A lot of those good Harrian players were gone. Some of the guys that were set to come back ended up leaving. Kareem Canties of the world, all that. So it was kind of bare bones there early on. I mean, you had a couple, you had like a young Austin Loop and a younger Ryan Taylor and a couple of guys like that, but they hadn't developed fully yet. So you knew it was going to be a tough build initially. So looking at his first season, 2014-2015 season, Marshall goes 11-21 overall, 7-11 in the Conference USA. And they started the year 3-0, but they, of course, didn't really play anybody by that point. But then after that, they went on the big-time struggle bus. They lost 15 of the next 16 games, and their only win was against, I believe, a Division II program. So they were struggling mightily. And, I can't really remember the scores of a lot of those games, but they weren't very close, most of them. And, you could tell they got a lot to work on. They were 4-15 in their first 19. But to their credit, they did actually start playing better towards the very last portion of the season. They actually did a pretty good job there. Ended up, like I said, 11 wins. But when you only have 4 in your first 19 games, they actually did kind of end on a little bit of a positive note. I remember watching several of those games. They started to come into their own a little bit more. He did not have a whole lot left from the Harrian regime, player-wise or anything. So it was just, you knew immediately it was just going to be a complete and utter rebuild of a season. I mean, there was no other way to describe it. It was what it was. It wasn't what anybody wanted. It wasn't what he wanted, but you knew that it was inevitable. Like, that's just the way it is. And, obviously they got bounced pretty early in the conference tournament. Whatever, it was going to be one of those seasons where it's just a rebuild. So it is what it is. But looking at the next season, however, we're going to just do these 2 years at a time because he coached 10 years. So it's easy math. So the next season in 2015-16 is when you started seeing the wheels start turning. You started seeing the potential. And if you recall, they brought in a guy by the name of James Kelly, who did some stuff for the Herd that year. Marshall goes, if you just listen to the record, you're not going to be that impressed. But once you hear some of the details, you'll understand why. 17-16, 12-6 in the Conference USA. They finished 3rd in Conference USA. They started 0-6. They were just dreadful to start. And they did not have John Elmore, was not eligible yet. And that first part of that season, he transfers in from VMI. He wasn't eligible yet. And as soon as John Elmore became eligible there in mid to late December, whenever it was, tide turned big time. Marshall goes on a big run. I mean, they were in position with a couple, 2-3 games left, and they could have possibly won the regular season, a Conference USA title. They could have possibly won it. And despite the fact they didn't win it, they still finished 3rd. You started seeing a lot of guys step up. John Elmore, James Kelly had a Conference USA Player of the Year caliber season. Ryan Taylor was coming on. Austin Loop was coming on. I think that was, I don't remember. No, I don't think Stevie Bryan was there yet. He was the next year. But you got a lot of guys coming in, and you could see the potential growing and growing and growing. They beat UTEP in the Conference USA tournament. I think it was the quarterfinals at that point because they got a bye. And then they lost to the eventual conference champion Middle Tennessee in the semifinal round because, of course, that was when Middle was rolling like nobody's business. They had Giddy Potts and all those guys. They were just dominant. But Marshall gave them a good game. And, despite the not impressive 17-16, it doesn't sound that impressive. You could see the potential was there, and you could see that they were coming on strong for the next few years. Finishing, for the year before, finishing middle to lower in the conference to finishing at third, you knew they were coming. So, talk about those first 2 years there under Dan there.
Yeah, so I mean, I was there for a lot of it, especially the first year. Again, this was a time where Marshall just stunk. I mean, really, they were not a very good basketball team at all. But my dad and I would just go. I mean, we just would. Tickets were incredibly cheap at the time. This was back in the day. Man, I feel old because I'm saying back in the day now, but you would buy your general admission tickets and be able to sit literally right behind the home bench. So like the cheapest seats in the entire arena, you could sit like one of the best places. So
yeah,
we would go. We would be there almost every single game. And you'd mentioned some of these guys. I mean, that first year, Stevie Browning was with the team. He was a red shirt though, didn't play. James Kelly also was technically with the team. He was somebody that was brought over when D'Antoni got hired. He too was a red shirt, just kind of a transfer. That was again back in the day when there were transfer rules and different things like that. You had to sit out.
Yeah.
So I mean, you had a young Ryan Taylor, like you mentioned. C.J. Burks was just a freshman, didn't really even play. And he was a walk-on too, which, I mean, we'll talk about him, of course. We have to whenever we talk about this era. But man, just the fact he walked on and then would eventually go on to be really top 5, one of the best players maybe ever. Just crazy what a story that is. But whenever I think about the first year, I remember this guy vividly, and you may remember him, you may not. Alexa Nikolic.
I do.
Nikolic, something like that.
Nikolic, yeah.
That's how. Okay, yes, I remember him so vividly. Man, D'Antoni wanted him to be awesome. I mean, he did. He put him in every single opportunity to be successful that he could possibly get. But the guy was like, I don't remember exactly where he was even from, maybe Serbia or Croatia or something like that. And basketball is just different over here. I mean, it's just a different game. It takes a long time to be able to kind of develop and figure it out. But I remember he wanted so badly for him to be able to be that point forward. He would handle the ball all the time. But as I was watching him, and I'm sure as you were too, if you remember him, any that first season, it was just like watching like a middle school boy that was going through puberty that did not know how to use his body the right way. He'd take the ball up, and it is some of the worst ball handling skills I'd ever seen. It was just like, whoa. And but and it's so interesting, and this is something that we're going to talk about surely whenever we talk about D'Antoni. But his focus on developing players is something that I admired so much, because when you take a look at Nikolic and where he started to where he finished, he was never going to be a starter. Like, he was never one of your guys that would come and be able to drop 20 points a night. But he ended up becoming like a very key bench player off the bench and made some big shots, made some big plays, great defender. So just stuff like that I remember very, very fondly. That first year, they were so bad. But man, I remember going no matter what. I mean, it just was what it was, and it was some good memories, even though it wasn't great. But man, year 2 is where things started to pick up, and really, I mean, yeah, you looking at the roster. Remember these guys, Terrence Thompson. Man, he was a stud. I'm telling you, he was an awesome player. Stevie Browning came into his own, started playing. We saw for the first time Penova, which reminded me a lot of that guy coming overseas. The first year of Penova, I was like, get this guy off the floor. He stinks. He's terrible. And how wrong I was, because he would eventually, we'll talk about him later too. But the star player of that entire year was James Kelly. I mean, that you lived and died by what James Kelly did. He was a special player. And I thought so often, what if James Kelly would have been able to have just one more season after this year? Like, if he would have been able to just have and play fully with John Elmore and all these guys collectively when they started to gel. Because when you look at the roster going forward, I mean, top to bottom, it was great guys overall, but they were missing that small forward, kind of almost like LeBron James. I would really um, I would equivalate James Kelly to LeBron James in his style because he could shoot decent, but man, he was so big and
Yeah.
intimidating. He could get rebounds, play tough defense, go to the basket, and I mean, he was 259 pounds for crying out loud. I mean, the guy was huge. So as he went, our team went, and he made some really really awesome plays down the stretch. I can remember, and that was just a very fond memory of a year, that second year of D'Antoni's tenure. Marshall finished third in the Conference USA, 12-6 in the conference overall, and that's a tough Conference USA. I do believe you talked about Giddy Potts and all those guys from Middle Tennessee. UAB ended up winning the regular season. And I think that is the year. I've talked about these guys before because it's just I don't remember their names. I can't tell you. I don't even know if you remember them or not. But for UAB, they called them the Twin Towers. One was like 6'11", the other one was 7'1", and they were both studs. I mean, they just were tough to play against. And so that UAB won the regular season there, 26-7 record. They were just a very very good team. This is back to when the Conference USA was a very good basketball conference too. I mean, let's just call it like it is. Top to bottom, it was pretty solid. So, that second season is 2015-2016 is just a very fond year overall. It was the first time in a while that we had seen a major step forward. And that was the year that all them Conference USA coaches that were all saying, "Oh, this is great. D'Antoni's coach at Marshall," were starting to say, "Oh, well, maybe we were wrong about that."
Yes, they sure were. And I love that point you mentioned about James Kelly, if he would have been able to come back the next year, because once we get ready to talk about this next year, I think it'll be very blatantly obvious if he comes back, Marshall's dancing that next year. I think it's just a foregone conclusion, and we're going to get to it. But yeah, you're right. That was the first year in a while where you actually had a lot of hope, and you could see, man, they're going somewhere, and you knew they were going somewhere because a lot of their talent at that point, yeah, they were losing Kelly and a couple guys, but they returned most of their talent, and you knew that they were coming. It was just a matter of time. But looking at the next couple of seasons, the next one being 2016-17, ended up being a good year. Ended up being a 20-15 season where they go 10-8 in Conference USA. They were pretty inconsistent that year in a regular season. They kind of struggled with that. It ended up being a loss, but one game that comes to my mind is a 93-91 loss at number 24 Cincinnati. I think it wasn't overtime, but it was a 93-91 loss on the road at a top 25 team. That was brutal. We had that game won 3 different times and ended up losing it. That was a heartbreaker. So you could see at that point they could be really good. And they were also kind of injured. They were kind of battle with injuries quite a bit that year. A lot of guys weren't healthy. But I mean, guys like Elmore and Burks at that point, he was still, I believe, coming off the bench, and he was coming on. Stevie Browning was coming on big. I mean, you had a lot of talent out there. Like I said, Terrence Thompson, he was back that year, and Penova was starting to kind of get his feet wet and all that. So they go, it's a kind of a so-so regular season, all things considered. But man, once they hit that conference tournament and they got healthy, you saw what they were capable of. They go on a Conference USA tournament run where first round they beat FAU 89-74. Second round they beat Old Dominion 64-63, really close nail biter. Then in the semifinals they beat Louisiana Tech 93-77, and that was a game where Marshall broke the Conference USA tournament single game record for most made threes. Austin Loop was draining them everywhere. John Elmore was draining them. Everybody was draining them everywhere. I mean, it was just, I don't remember the number, but I just remember it being, it was like raining threes. It was insane. And at that point, you get all the way to the championship round, the finals against Middle Tennessee, the juggernaut at the time. They were it, and boy, you know what? We might have lost that game, but we lose 83-72. But I remember it very well. It was a 2-point game with less than 10 minutes to go in the game. And we had a relatively easy bucket to tie the game, missed it, And then at that point, we just could not quite get the momentum back, and Middle ends up winning by 11. But, man, I'll tell you what, I know this is all hypothetical, but if James Kelly is on that team, if he's 1 year, if he's one more year with the Herd, that team goes to the dance. No question in my mind. So despite the fact that they did not win the Conference USA tournament, they were in the final, and they have a 20-win season. So each year, by this point, they go up and wins. And then that leads us to the year of all years, 2017-18, in which the Herd makes history, goes 25-11 overall, 12-6 in Conference USA. They make it all the way to the NCAA tournament for the first time since 1987, and we'll get into all that. Just a phenomenal year, really, really great year. They beat Middle Tennessee twice. They basically ended Middle Tennessee's run of dominance. They're Marshall's basically the team that ends it. So the second time when they beat Middle on the road, this was the regular season finale. Middle was ranked number 24 in the country. Marshall goes down there and beats them 76-67, plays really well, and that's a month or two after beating them in Huntington. So that was shocking. I did not expect that. And they get a first-round bye in the conference tournament. They're the 4 seed. First round, they beat UTSA 95-81. Second round, they beat – that's the quarterfinals. Semifinals, they beat Southern Miss, who was the team that upset Middle Tennessee the round before that. Middle Tennessee was the 1 seed. Southern Miss was the 9 seed, and Southern Miss upsets them, shocks them. So now Marshall draws Southern Miss, and they beat them 85-75, get all the way to the championship game, plays the nemesis Western Kentucky, who had beaten Marshall twice in the regular season that year, if you recall. The one time in Huntington, they just smoked them bad. So you were kind of worried, it's hard to beat a team 3 times, but this team's really good. And boy, in one of the greatest games we've ever seen from Marshall basketball history, 67-66, trademark, 67-66, Marshall wins. That's just like one of the most just insane moments of my life, like as a fan. It really is. Like I was absolutely that's like euphoria I don't think I've ever felt before. Like it really was. And at that point they've actually done it, like for the first time in my lifetime, they've actually gotten there. And they're the 13th seed in the East region of the NCAA tournament. They go all the way out to San Diego, which makes no sense whatsoever. You're in the East region, you're playing in San Diego. They play the 4 seed Wichita State, who at that point was really good, had a lot of good players. I mean, Austin Reeves is still balling today. I mean, you had some guys on that team. Greg Marshall was the coach, and Herd wins 81-75. Great game, a phenomenal game, phenomenal performance. Just special stuff. And we won't talk about that next round because they lost, but we won't talk about that one. But regardless, Marshall goes to, like I said, 25-win team. First time in a long, long time. They won 25 games. John Elmore was the Conference USA tournament MVP. He should have been player of the year. He got robbed there. CJ Burks was a beast. This is the first year he was a legitimate starter. Monster year for him, 20-plus points a game for both those guys. Ideen Penova was the X factor of that team. Led the nation in blocks, averaged 15 points a game, 8 rebounds, 4 blocks, whatever it was. He was absolutely sensational. That was the key to that team. Jared West, as a freshman, baller, just a dog on defense. Great player. Jansen Williams played well. Darius George made some plays. We had a good team. We had a really good team, and that was a special season. So talk about those 2 seasons, 2016 through 2018 there.
Yeah, well, 2016 was the year that I think that fan engagement was back for Marshall. Like, you're talking about crowds that would I'm looking at the overall attendances here, and there's like 6 or 7 times that I have seen that there's one instance whenever they played Middle Tennessee where we saw about 7,000 people in the Cam Henderson Center. Right now, today it's 5,500 capacity, and then there's other instances where 6,617, 6,800, and so on and so forth. And so there was just mass excitement. I mean, the team had so many people rooting for them, and that had a lot to do with D'Antoni himself, because again, he's just a Marshall guy. If there was ever somebody that the city of Huntington could and should have rooted for. It was definitely him. The guys were playing fantastic basketball. John Elmore came out. That was his breakout season in 2016, where he proved, hey, last year's half of the year was not just a fluke, but I'm here to stay. And so that was the year where really excitement was at an all-time high. Made it all the way to the conference championship, as you said, just came up short there. But then, as you mentioned, 2017 to 2018, that is the year of all years. This is what you hope for whenever somebody gets hired as the basketball coach of any program. You want to go dancing, you want to go to the March Madness tournament, and then once you get there, you'd like to be able to make some noise, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, again, the same type of thing that I was saying. You look at these crowd numbers, and just the entire season, just fans showed up, did a fantastic job of filling the Cam Anderson Center, and as you mentioned, the overall win there against Western Kentucky is an all-time great, an all-time classic win that we will never, ever forget in all of Marshall history. This is one of the main reasons as to why Marshall and Western Kentucky are such bitter foes now. I mean, this is not even just a couple years off of the moment where they destroyed our season of hopes and dreams. So we returned the favor for them there. And so that was definitely something that was just, I remember where I was at. I mean, I was in my living room because they were I still don't know. I don't know if they still play here now. They used to play like in the Dallas Cowboys practice facility or something, which is just so dumb. Yeah. But I remember watching the game, and I was sitting in my chair and different things, and that last like couple seconds, I'm almost like in the fetal position, and then once the clock finally hit 0 and it dawns like, hey, we're winning this game, I jumped up, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, like this don't happen, like I don't remember this ever happening. So it was such a huge deal, and that's just a special moment. That's an all-time great moment for me as a Marshall fan. And it got a little bit better because not too long, as you mentioned, there at Wichita, or playing against Wichita State and San Diego, man, what a performance. I can remember John Elmore just hitting threes from the logo. I mean, he was just throwing them up there. I don't even know if he was looking half the time, and they're just sinking. It was unbelievable. And that team, man, it was so special. Penova, the guy that a couple of years ago I was like, he don't even deserve a Division I scholarship. This guy's terrible. Well, he ended up, like you said, leading the country in blocks and was a fantastic rebounder, was a point forward. I mean, the guy had handles. There's multiple times where, I mean, he would take the ball up the floor and he would he would do crazy stuff. And you mentioned Jared West. I mean, he now is kind of like he who shall not be named because of the whole betrayal in the basketball tournament, the TBT. But he's honestly one of the greatest defenders that I've ever seen in my life. Like he's got to be one of the most annoying people to play against. Oh yeah. I was sitting there thinking, I remember the way that he would defend people. He'd have one hand always right there by the ball handler, like ready to steal it, and the other hand would also be high just in case a pass would go high. So he was always prepared. And I was like, man, I've never seen somebody play defense like he did before, and he was a phenomenal defensive player. I mean, just top to bottom. You mentioned C.J. Burks, a guy that really deserves more credit than what he does. If he would have been in any other era of Marshall basketball, he would be even more fondly remembered. And then he already is fondly remembered, don't get me wrong, but still, I mean, he is honestly a top 5 Marshall basketball player. Just he could do about anything, and he was so fun. And that was the most enjoyable basketball season that I've ever seen. I mean, it was just so much fun from the start to the finish. I mean, regular season, and this is something too that we need to talk about with D'Antoni because this is very interesting. His teams would sputter always at the start.
They would,
like slow starts. They would. This year, I'm looking. They lost to Morehead State. I mean, why? You shouldn't lose to Morehead State. They also lost to William and Mary. I mean, just some games that they had no business losing. So, but the way that he would always go about things is non-conference at the start of the year. he'd rotate guys in that would not see the floor at all later on. I mean, he's just getting everybody playing time and figuring out, all right, this guy can play. This guy's good in this situation. And looking back, being a coach of a small mid-major program, really, that's a smart thing. That's a smart way about going things because you find out who your players are. You find out who is going to be successful in the high-pressure moments. And at the time, I was sitting there thinking, like, is Coach an idiot? I mean, what in the world? But, he obviously knew what he was doing. He really, really did. And that was just a fantastic year. As you mentioned a moment ago, final game of the season. Boy, oh boy, do I wish that could have gone differently. However, to save my feelings and to not give any credit where it may be due, we'll just move on. We won't talk about that final game of the season.
I mean, I said it back when it happened. Obviously it's easy to say, but if we would have played anybody else in that second round, I feel like we would have had a chance. I don't know, man. It just didn't work out. Like, we were not equipped for that style of play. We just weren't that style. So it just wasn't going to work for us. But I like that point you talked about with Pinova being, a point forward and be able to do some things and handles. Do you remember in that NCAA tournament game towards the last couple minutes of that game where he literally crossed over Landry Shamet, who's going to be in the finals this week? He crossed him over like he was a chump. And I'm just like, this guy is 6'11". Like, it was absolutely, he was insane. He was insane that year. And it really broke my heart that he did not come back the next year, because that is a huge talking point for the next season that we're getting ready to get into, 2018-19. We had a good year. We were fine. We had a lot of talent back, but we were missing that X factor. We had John Elmore back. We had CJ Burks back. Rondell Watson, another guy I forgot, glue guy, great player, Rondell Watson. Had all those guys back, but we did not have Pinova. And that was the difference that year. If you remember, there was a lot of hype around Iron Bennett at that time. He never quite panned out. I don't know, injuries, physique. I'm not saying that as a joke. I don't really know, but I'm just saying it did not work out. So looking at the 2018-19 season, we go 23-14. So another 20-plus win season. We go 11-7 in Conference USA. And the one word that I would use to describe that season before the ending is inconsistent. And it's kind of insane to talk about, because looking at it like this is literally straight through the entire regular season. I'm going to read it off just real quickly. Like, this is how it goes. 5-1 start. Then they lose 5 of their next 7. Then they win 5 straight to open up conference. Then they lose 7 of their next 8. Then they win 5 straight heading into the conference tournament. So it's like, that made no sense at all. Like, I do not understand why that team was so inconsistent, but it was, that's straight facts. Like, that is exactly how it went down. And, they get to the conference tournament, and that was the year that pod play started, which was very weird and hokey to begin with, where it was like, despite the fact that they actually technically finished tied for second, they were the 6th seed because of the pod play thing. And it's been so long since I've thought of that. I don't even really understand it, but they were the 6th seed, I believe, that year, despite the fact they finished tied for second in the win-loss column. But so they got to play. They would have to have played 4 games in 4 days. They beat Rice in the first round, 82-65. But then the next round against Southern Miss, they lose 82-73, which Southern Miss was a good team that year. It was a hard-fought game. They lost. But then the question arose, are you going to play more games? Are you going to play in a pay-for-play tournament to get John Elmore that scoring record? And the answer was yes. They play in the collegeinsider.com tournament. Elmore needed that scoring record. That was why they did it. There's no other reason that they would have done it besides that. So in the first round of that CIT, all these games were at the CAM. They beat IUPUI 78-73. That was the game. What a juggernaut there, man. And that was the game which Elmore broke the scoring record. That was the only thing to write home about that game. Next game, Presbyterian, 83-66 win. Next game after that, Hampton, 80-78. And then they get to the finals against Green Bay, not the Packers, Green Bay, 90-70. Marshall wins. They win the CIT tournament title. So you know what? If you're going to play in a tournament like that, you might as well go and win it, because there's a banner in the CAM for it now. So that makes it worth it. They hadn't won a postseason tournament in 80, 70, whatever years by that point. So that was exciting, that just in its own right. And it was great to see John Elmore get that scoring record. So they go 23-14. I mean, that's a good year on paper. Yeah, there was very much inconsistencies, and they missed their X factor Pinova that year. I think if Pinova had come back for that season, I think they're dancing again. I just do. He was the guy that got him over the hump. As great as Elmore was, as great as Burks and all those guys were, Pinova's the one that got him over the hump. So they were missing him drastically that year. And then looking at the 2019-2020 season, ended up being a very strange year. You lose a lot of Elmore's gone, Burks is gone, Watson's gone, all those seniors from the year before are gone. And Elmore had actually gotten an extra year of eligibility the year before. They weren't even sure if he was going to get that extra year, and he got it. But now by 2019-2020, he was gone for good. He graduated fully, exhausted his eligibility. So, it was obviously going to be an up and down year. They kind of started a little bit slow, 9-12 through their first 21 games. But then after that, they really did play well. They go on and they win 8 of their final 11 games. And they get to the Conference USA tournament, and they beat UTEP 86-78 in the first round. And we never know what happens there because COVID shut it all down. We don't know we don't know what they would have done if they would have lost the next game, if they would have won the whole thing. Well, we don't know. But that's what happened. That was their last game. So they go 17-15, 10-8 in the conference. So for a rebuilding year, I took that. I took that in stride. That was basically a year just to kind of reset everything, to kind of set a new standard for what the years to come were going to be. Tavion Kinsey, that was the first year if you remember, he started breaking out as a freshman in 2018-19. He started coming on, but the 2019-2020 season and beyond is where he was the man. He was that guy, and that was the year that he really started coming on big time. So a little bit of ups and downs those couple years, but talk about those years there, 2018 through 2020.
Yeah, so I kind of look at D'Antoni's entire tenure here. You can kind of break it down into different eras. The first year was the transition year. Like that was the transition era where you had bad basketball. You just did. And then the year after that, you would go on basically a 3-year stretch of it being what would be better called as, like, you could call it the John Elmore era. I mean, it was his team. He was the main guy. And that's your most successful era that we've ever seen here. And I kind of agree with you. The greatest talking point around that team in 2019 again was just what would happen if Pinova would have stayed. I mean, he got bad advice. Somebody told him he's going to make it to the league, and he ended up playing overseas, and he still is right now. I mean, he's a good player.
Yeah.
But if he would have stayed one more season, you never know, man. I mean, he could have led the entire nation in a couple more statistical categories and ended up becoming an NBA player. You just never know. So that's a great what if. And you mentioned it, just so much inconsistency because you didn't have that key piece. You needed that guy in the middle, and Iran Bennett, like you said, was just not ready. I'm not trying to be funny either, but he was just overweight. And he wasn't able to get up and down the court the same way that D'Antoni's teams played. If he went somewhere else, he may have had success where they slowed things down. But the way that we ran, I mean, it was go, go, go. So, you weren't going to last here unless you could be able to keep up. And he just wasn't able to do that. So, we definitely missed having that big man that was able to be a point forward, who had some ball handling skills, who could shoot. I mean, Pinova could shoot, man. I'm telling you, he was a great shooter. And we really missed that. And you mentioned too, that's Kinsey, where he first got some playing time. And to think about it like this, I mean, if Pinova would have stayed too, I mean, you have C.J. Burks, you have John Elmore, and you've got all these guys. Plus, you would have a Kinsey coming off the bench with less pressure, because I think a lot of the times whenever he would come into the game, all right, you're now the second option because you're subbing in for C.J. Burks or you're subbing in for John Elmore or whomever. But if Pinova would have been able to stay, he's kind of able to stay in the background a little bit more and maybe sneak in a little bit more, points here, points there. And I really think that would have helped Kinsey if Pinova would have stayed as well, as weird as that may sound. But, going on, winning the CIT tournament, whatever it is, it's great, awesome. it just really wasn't that exciting, though. I'm looking again at just I have all of the attendances here. You're 3,725 for the first round, 3,383 for the second. By the finals, you had 5,748. This is again when the CAM was around 8,000 in capacity. So it just kind of was lackluster. Nobody was really that excited about it. You hang a banner, you got John Elmore's scoring record, and that's all well and good. But really, that is all that would have brought. Now, after that season, then you transition to another era. So again, you started out with the transition era, then you go to the John Elmore era. Now this is Tavion Kinsey's team. As he goes, they're going to go. And like you said, the season ended up finishing short. Couldn't finish it all the way, and because of COVID-19 and all that good stuff. But I think that it honestly wasn't a bad thing that the season was cut short, because really Marshall was a middle of the pack team. I'm looking at the standings here right now. I mean, they were literally just in the middle. They finished 10-8, just above 500, and overall 17-15 records. So I mean, they weren't lighting the world on fire by any means. And they always again struggled there at the start. They lost to some MAC teams, which is something that I just can't stand. I cannot deal with losing to a MAC team. They lost to Toledo not once but twice. They played each other at the MABC Invitational in November, and then would later go to Toledo on December the 8th, and they'd lose to them there. Then lost to Akron too, and so just two really kind of tough losses. So, looking at the rest of the season, it was just kind of lackluster. They never really found a great deal of consistency. They'd win two, then lose one, win two, then lose one. That's kind of a big theme there towards the end of the season in particular. So, I'm almost glad that the conference tournament kind of quit there, because I think that for Tavion Kinsey's era to really get going, they needed a hard reset. They needed to take a deep breath almost, because you're going from the greatest era in Marshall basketball history, arguably, with John Elmore and just all that he was able to accomplish. Now you're trying to be able to match that, and it's just not going to happen overnight. So, we see the world come to an end, and it's also an opportunity for Marshall to reset. And really, because of that reset, it would kind of set the stage eventually for there to be really an all-out end for Kinsey that we'll talk about sooner than later. There's a couple of seasons here too that really don't make much sense that we'll talk about. But yeah, that we're seeing the start of the Tavion Kinsey era, and as that begins to take place, you're starting to miss some of the pieces that were very, very, very influential.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, it was just, you knew that there was gonna, your guys of your Elmores and your Burks and your Penavas, like you knew those guys were going to be gone, and you had to rebuild it. I mean, you had to start over and find the new identity of the team. Not that the style was going to change, but they definitely started finding that with Kinsey, and you started seeing just what a freak he was athletically, just great basketball player. That's what he was. But they were just missing those one or two extra pieces. Like they were missing something there, and they eventually found it, but ultimately didn't quite work out like we thought. We'll get to that later on. But looking at these next couple years, the 2020-2021 season was a good year, good enough year. 15-7, 9-5 in the conference. That was a COVID shortened year. They did not play very many games that year compared to what they normally played. They played in front of next to no crowds that year, at home or away. It was that year. So it was kind of a weird season. That's honestly one of the seasons I remember the least about, probably if not the least.
Same here.
Yeah, it's just like obviously you couldn't really go to the games much, and I don't think I went to one that year. So it's like it was just a strange set of circumstances. But they were a good team. I mean, they were good. You had Kinsey coming on again. You had Andy Taylor starting, another guy we won't mention again. But we had Taylor coming on that year. He did his thing. Jared West was still there. And Achille Killen was starting to come on at that time. He was a young guy. So they had good players. I mean, they had started to turn it around. 15-7 is not a bad year when you only play 22 games. And unfortunately, though, what really hurt them that year was the fact that they got bounced so early in the conference tournament against Rice, 72-68. Rice was not very good that year. That was just a bad loss, just a bad loss, because they, that team really had potential there to possibly go on a bit of a run, given the weird circumstances around the conference at that point with COVID and all that, but it just didn't work out. So 15-7 overall, we'll take that. And then you had some hope going into the next season, which the next season ended up being one of the biggest determining factors as to why D'Antoni didn't end up going longer than he did. I feel like those two of those last 3 years we're going to get to, that's pretty much what broke the camel's back. And the 2021-22 season was not good at all. You go 12-21 overall, 4-14 in the Conference USA. That was just abysmal at that point, because from 2015 through 2021, they had 6 straight seasons of above 500 basketball, which was the first time since the mid-'80s that they had that. And that's in that period, they go 117-78 overall and 64-40 in Conference USA. So at that point, Marshall's one of the upper echelon teams in the conference. Year in and year out, you can pretty much count on them being one of the better teams. But unfortunately, it all goes really wrong in 2021-22. They go 7-3 to start. So you're thinking, okay, that's a good start. I remember there was some good games in there. I think they beat I was at a couple of them. It was a fun start to the year, whatever. But man, after that, it just wheels fell off. They had lost 10 straight games after a 7-3 start. And then they lost 13 out of 14. So I don't know what went wrong at that point, but man, and you still had these guys. You still had Kinsey. You still had Taylor. You still had Anachili-Killen. You still had I don't know what it was, because these players didn't just forget how to play. I mean, I don't know what went wrong there. And they get to the Conference USA tournament, very low seed as a 4-14 conference team. They beat FIU in the first round, 74-67 or 62, whatever. They beat FIU, and then they lost to Louisiana Tech, 77-67. So it just was not a season anybody saw coming at all. Don't know what went wrong, because like I said, they had a lot of the same players that we're going to talk about for the next year, where they won the most regular season games in 70 some years. So I don't know what went wrong that year, but talk about those 2 seasons there, 2020 through 2022, because honestly, that was a very, very forgettable 2 years.
Yeah, it was. I mean, just the world was such a strange place to be at. And like you said, that 2020 to 2021 season, it's so strange. Like, I don't remember hardly anything. I really don't.
Yeah.
And I think there's a few reasons. I mean, I don't think that Marshall was playing a lot of their games on ESPN Plus. I think they're playing like on Facebook or like ESPN The Ocho or wherever.
Yeah.
They were just playing like somebody was taking drawings, and then they were having the flip cards. I don't even that's how hard it was to watch Marshall sports once upon a time. So I hated the Conference USA. So glad that we're out of that.
Yeah.
But really 2021, I think that's the season. 21-22, that's the season that a lot of people jumped off the D'Antoni bandwagon. They said, we're done. Like, he got us to that one shining season, that great year that we had. We had a good run with John Elmore and different things, but overall, we're just done, because we just can't get back to that same level that we used to be on. And that's whenever you started hearing people start to chirp and say, well, let's get D'Antoni out of there. Let's try and make a change. Let's go a different direction, all these different types of stuff. And trying to put my finger on exactly what happened in that 2021 the 2021-2022 season, I can't tell you. They had guys. It was a good team on paper because of what they would end up doing a year later. I really have no clue. I really just don't know. It's very, very interesting to me. I mean, I think that one factor, of course, was that they were missing a true big man.
Right.
They needed somebody that was going to be legit, that would anchor the down low in the paint. You had an Obina and a Anachili-Killen who was a freshman, but he wasn't going to be ready. And he's only standing at 6'8". Michael Byers was on the team still too, and He was pretty good, not a bad player by any means, but still they just needed somebody to dominate, and that was the key. I mean, it really was with D'Antoni's teams. If you had a big man who could do his job well, man, the entire team was going to have success, just from the nature of them being able to play. I mean, when you shoot that many threes, you're going to miss some, right? You
Mm-hmm.
need somebody to get those rebounds, those offensive rebounds in particular, and dish it back out or put it back up. And not having that one guy that would be able to really just anchor the team, I think that was your biggest problem. That and not shooting well, because if you can remember, going throughout the tenure of D'Antoni's seasons, live by the three, die by the three.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be some games where I'm like, what are y'all doing? What shot is that? Like, what in the world? Like, you can't shoot that well, man. but then, like, the next game, they'd make it. So
Yeah.
he really believed in just keep shooting. Just, it don't matter if you miss 100 of them, you're going to make one of them at some point. So, and I think that the main reason as to why they didn't have a lot of success is because the lack of a big man under the basket. I think that is the main culprit for those seasons where things just didn't turn out the way that they should.
Yeah, I mean it's the yin and yang, man. I mean that's what it is. Like when you're playing that style of basketball, yeah, you got to have your guards and your sharpshooters and your guys that can hit the corner three and your guys that can put the ball on the floor and dish it out and facilitate. You got to have all that. You got to have guys that can make free throws. Got to have guys that can make layups, dunks. I mean that was literally the system, because I remember for school when I was still at Marshall, I literally interviewed and talked to Dan D'Antoni that before his second year, and he said organized chaos. That's exactly what he called it. And he said the idea was to get a layup, a free throw, or a three-pointer. That was what he wanted. But man, you had to have that big, especially a dynamic big, like a big you could actually count on to like make some plays. You had to have that, and they did not have it those couple years really. So that got remedied the next year, which we're going to talk about. 2022-23 was the best regular season that we had seen in terms of wins in 76 years at that point. They had a 24 win regular season, and it was phenomenal. They go for the overall season 24-8, 13-5, and this was their first year in the Sun Belt Conference. So they go 13-5 in the Sun Belt in year one. Tavion Kinsey he comes back for his fifth year. This was his fifth year because of the COVID where they gave him an extra year. So he comes back miraculously. He could have probably went about anywhere. He comes back and he has Sun Belt Player of the Year. 22 points a game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. He was sensational. Andy Taylor, 20 points a game, 4.7 rebounds, 4.7 assists. He was a first-team guy. Kinsey and Taylor both first-team guys. Camden Kerfman comes over as a transfer. He was a three-point specialist there for a while. Micah Hanlogden comes in as a freshman, and that was the difference maker because he ends up being one of the top guys in the country in blocks. He wasn't like necessarily a guy that was going to put up 15, 20 a game. I think he only averaged like 7 or 8 a game. But what he brought on the defensive side of the ball, much like Ideen Penova brought a few years prior, that is what put that team over the top. And they had a very good start to the year, 12-2. They were off to the races. They were playing really well. I mean, they came in year one in the Sun Belt, and they played very, very well. And they got themselves in a position to where if they had won the final game of the regular season at Old Dominion, they would have been the number 1 seed in the Sun Belt tournament and the regular season champions. But they lose that game 71-67, and they end up being the 3 seed. And so that's just like last year. Last season, they could have won the regular season or tied for it, and they lost to Georgia Southern. So very similar there. So they get to the Sun Belt tournament down there in Pensacola, losing the first game. Tragically lost in the first game to Texas State, 71-68. That was Nate Martin on Texas State, and he would come over the next year and play really well for us. So that was very unfortunate. That was they just really wet the bed there at the end of the year with 2 straight losses like that. That team was way better than that. They were one of the creams of the crop of the conference that year. They really should have been better than that. And then after that season, though, the fact that they did have that most regular season wins in 76 years title, Dan D'Antoni gets extended 3 years. And I remember a lot of people talked about that and were some were on the fence about it. Some were flat out against it, and then some thought it was a great decision. So it was a controversial, I guess if you want to look at it, controversial move. And then the next season, 2023-24, went downhill again. I just don't know what it was again. I mean, obviously you lost a lot of talent, so that was probably the culprit of it. Tavion Kinsey was gone. Andy Taylor transferred and literally did nothing where he transferred to. Absolutely nothing. Micah Hanlogden transferred to Florida. He did okay there, but he could have been the man in Huntington. Just not a great year. 13-20, 7-11 in the Sun Belt. Just not a very good year. I mean, it was a rebuild. It was another one of those like start over kind of years. And by year 10, you didn't need that. Like you could not be in a position to where you had to restart in year 10. And they get to the Sun Belt tournament, pretty low seed. I don't know what they were, but they beat Georgia State in the first round, 86-74. Lost to James Madison, 81-64 in the second round. I mean, you had some talent there. Anna Chillikillen still there at that point. I think he was a junior that year. Kevon Boyles, remember him? He had 1 year. He actually played pretty well that year. Kerfman was still there. He had 2 years for Marshall. Very inconsistent shooter that year. Nate Martin came over from Texas State. He was a very, very good force down low. Not a dynamic scorer or anything, but just a tough guy. Just a guy that's going to, ground and pound and get you some rebounds, and, that's what they needed. So good stuff there. And then despite the fact that he had just been extended after the season prior, they end up deciding that they're parting ways with Dan D'Antoni after that season. And then, of course, ends up hiring within. Corny Jackson comes in. He's getting ready to go into his third year this fall. So look at those. Take a little bit of time to talk about those last 2 years there, because you go from very, very high to pretty dang low.
Right. Well, when we talk about 2022 and 2023 season, that's probably my favorite season of Marshall basketball that I can ever remember. I watched every game, man. I mean, I was locked in. The team was just, the first game of the year, remember, like you said, losing to Queens, I was like, oh no.
Oh yeah.
Like, this is going to be a disastrous season. But they just found their footing there. I mean, they were fantastic in the Sun Belt. And Tavion Kinsey was the man. Andrew Taylor was the man. Micah Hanlogden was just so good. Like you mentioned, he was a freshman at the time. And so it's hard to really understand the overall value that he brought. But again, whenever Marshall has a big man underneath, and it's just going to help, especially whenever you've got those guys that can score on the outside. So it was a magical season overall. And to lose to the 11 seed Texas State, it's just like, what in the world are we doing? Like, that makes no sense to me. I don't understand it even to this very day. And that is the moment where a lot of Marshall fans just checked out on D'Antoni, because that entire season was like, yeah, we're seeing success, we're doing all this, but we really need to see it at the end of the year. Like, we want to get back to the dance. We want to get to the NIT. This is the goal. And in order for us to be okay with him, then that's where we need to go. He's been here for 9 years now, and so it's either that or bust. And so he ended up not making it, and I think that's where a lot of fans just departed. And as you mentioned, the very next year was just a disaster. You get rid of almost everybody, and you bring in Nate Martin, which, he was a fantastic player, very, very thankful for his contributions to our program. But still yet, Marshall is not going to win on the style of D'Antoni with just a big man. Like, that's just not how we do things. We got to have the scores. We got to run well. We have to do all these things. So it was just a disastrous season, and a lot of fans were just checked out. You take a look at the attendances, it's bad. It ain't good. Like 3,000 people in a gym, to where a couple of years ago we saw double that usually as the average. So a lot of fans were checked out. A lot of people left the program. And I think the biggest downfall for D'Antoni was the new era of college athletics. Mm-hmm. I think that was really his Achilles heel, because he was a big guy of taking you whenever you were at your lowest. I'll develop you for a couple of seasons, and we will create something out of you that you never saw in yourself. But to see guys that were just there for one season, then transferring out, that was just something that D'Antoni just wasn't good at. I'm just being honest. He just wasn't good at. He wasn't good at going out in the transfer portal and getting these guys that would automatically replace these guys that he developed. So it was difficult on him. I think the game, in all reality, passed him by a little bit. I personally disagreed with the decision of firing him. I understood it. I mean, I got it. I just wish it didn't happen that way. I wish he would have been able to have one more year at the bare minimum, finish the contract. But, they obviously thought it would be better to part ways in different things. But I really believe that the biggest reason as to why at the back end of his career we didn't see the successes that we saw at the front is because he just didn't keep the guys. He couldn't retain the guys that he was going to develop and make something out of.
Yeah.
And so, it was tragic. I hate it. I wish that, for him, for his sake, that he could have found a way to somehow go back out on top and finish on his own, desire. Whenever he wanted to quit, he could have been able to quit. But that's just not the reality of it. And so we had 10 years with D'Antoni, and it was a magical 10 years. It really was. We saw excitement in the Cam to which we had not seen ever since Derrick Rose and Michael Jordan's son and Donnie Jones came back. I mean, it's just how it is. So, it was a time to which it's something I fondly look back on. He's definitely my favorite coach in all of Marshall history. And quite frankly, right now, I miss him. I really, really do. I wish that he would be back. But, this is another conversation for another day. But I've never understood this, and this is no disrespect to Corny because, again, he's trying his best. I know he's not trying to go out there and put up a bad team. But if you wanted a different result for your basketball program, my question always has been, why did you hire the assistant coach? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It never has, I don't think it ever will. We'll see what happens in the future with it. But, that's really neither here nor there. That's just my personal opinion on the matter. But, when we talk about D'Antoni, I tend to think more on the good than the bad because he gave us a lot of fantastic memories. And he's definitely somebody that I look on as, he is probably the best coach for Marshall. Now, is he the best coach that ever coached at Marshall? No, he's not. We'll talk about some of the better coaches. But for Marshall, nobody could ever fit the bill better than Dan D'Antoni did.
I think that is quite literally the perfect way to look at it because you're talking about a guy that bleeds green, number one. He's got history with Marshall, loves it. He embraces it. He sells it everywhere he goes. He's at every game still now. Every home game, he's there, right behind the scorer's table. So he's a Marshall guy. He bleeds green. He tries to he put Marshall out there. He's a great ambassador for Marshall University, for the basketball program, and he was willing to stay that long. After having very good success, that just wouldn't happen. If it was most other people, that just would not happen. And I think you're right. Those last couple of years, at that point is when the transfer portal really started taking off big time. Those last couple of years, especially that last year, the 23-24 year, that's when it really started breaking out. And yeah, you're right. He was used to that was his thing is he would recruit a lot of guys that took some time to develop, and there was nothing wrong with that in that era because you had the time and the means to be able to do it. But now everything's so fast paced. Everybody moves around. Everybody thinks that the grass is always greener, and you just don't have that time. If you had Ideen Pineda, I don't think he would have. If you would have had him in the 2020, mid 20, well, whatever, 23, 24, whatever, that kind of era, I don't think he ends up staying very long, and I don't think he ends up developing into the player he turned into for Marshall. It would have been somebody else. And, that's just the fact of it. So despite some ups and downs, like I said, he's still one of the most beloved figures in Marshall history by far. Everybody still loves the man. You might not agree with his principles and his style and all that, but the man is a Marshall legend forever and always. So looking at his overall tenure, he goes 177 and 148 overall. So that's 54%. And if you look at, like I talked about, those 6 years from 2015 to 2021, where he was above 500 every year, at that point, he won 60% of those games in those 6 years. And so you could see the other years is where it dipped down to 54% overall. So he really was very strong there for a good while, but then it just kind of started going downhill a little bit. 95 and 81 overall in conference between the Sun Belt and the Conference USA. So that's not bad either. Obviously, he gets them their first ever NCAA tournament win. I don't care what else you want to say. You could disagree with some of his things that he did. You could disagree with some of his styles, some of his decisions, whatever. That is his legacy. His legacy is getting them back to the NCAA tournament and winning for the first time ever. That is what he should always be remembered for. And if he didn't do a single other good thing for Marshall, which is not the case, that is what he should be remembered for. That right there. One Conference USA tournament title as well. That's rarefied air for Marshall. They had not won a conference tournament title since 87. So been a long time. 2 all-time leading scorers. The man had 2 all-time program leading scorers in his tenure. John Elmore gets it first, then Tavion Kinsey gets it. That is crazy to me. To talk about however many 100+ years of basketball that Marshall's played, he has the 2 current all-time leading scorers. I mean, that's crazy to me. He just managed to do so much with these players. A lot of these guys were very under recruited players, and he just absolutely took them to new heights. Some of the other bullet points here that I think we got to talk about just real quickly. There was too many inconsistent years from 2021 onwards. Just couple really bad years there. I think that's the straw that broke the camel's back. The 2021-22 year, and then the 23-24 year. That's just what did him in. You at that point, you should not, you don't like to see that big of a regression. So that was what hurt him there for sure. Ended on a sour note, no doubt about it. You would have liked to have seen him gone out with a big year, like you said. Just didn't happen. The stigma around him for years, and the stigma around his brother is, okay, a lot of offense, but not much defense. And I don't know. I never really bought into that much. If you know basketball, let's just look at a 100 to 95 score of an average win is basically the same as if you would have won 50-45. Same thing. It's the style.
It's tempo.
It's tempo. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to score 100 points and hold a team to 40. That's just not going to happen. So, I mean, look at some of those guys he had. I mean, Penaville was a leading shot blocker. Han Logden was a top 10 or 5 shot blocker. I mean, yeah, they weren't like tremendous on defense, but and John Elmore was always one of the top leaders in steals in the conference. I mean, you had some guys that could defend. Burks could defend. Jared West sure as heck could defend. So they were not nearly as bad defensively as people like to make out. And I know that they're going to say, oh, they give up all these points. Well, yeah, but they're scoring a lot of points. So what are you going to do? So that was a stigma around him that I just thought was kind of unfair. He got the most. I said this for years and years and years, and I'm going to take it all the way to the end. He got the most out of every single player that he had. No matter what your talent level is, no matter what your fullest potential and capabilities are, he got the most out of you, no matter what. And he recruited West Virginia very well. When WVU wouldn't look at these guys at all, give them a second look, Dan D'Antoni would bring them in. And that was the bulk of an NCAA tournament team was West Virginia kids. John Elmore, C.J. Burks, Jared West, Rondell Watson. Those are West Virginia kids. So he got the most out of all those guys, all those players. No matter what you might not have done that. You might not even have done that much at Marshall, but he got the most out of you every time. And, I know a lot of people talk about the fact that he recruited a lot of overseas guys, and a lot of those guys didn't pan out. But, you got to sometimes think outside the box. When you're at a program like Marshall and you're trying to compete, you got to think a little bit outside the box, because you're not going to get a lot of the blue chip guys. You're not going to get any of them, quite frankly. I mean, Tavion Kinsey, really, if he was if he had come out of high school and if he was maybe 20 pounds heavier, 15 pounds heavier, he probably would have went somewhere like Duke or Carolina. He was that kind of an athlete, obviously. But I think his small stature, like he was kind of a stick there early on. I feel like if he would have came out of high school bigger, he would have went somewhere very big, but I'm glad he didn't work out that way. But regardless, that's kind of some of the stuff around him. And we got to give an overall grade for his tenure, because obviously that's just how we have to wrap it up. So what you got there?
I'm going to give him an A minus. And the reason I give him the minus there and not a plus or just a flat out A is for two reasons. Number one is slow starts. Like, the most frustrating thing as a fan that I desired Marshall to be able to do is just be ranked. Man, I wanted him to be ranked in the top 25 so bad. This was back in a time where you didn't have to have a Miami, Ohio run to be ranked either. You didn't have to win every single game. But, just getting an upset win and then, maybe just losing one or two games in your non-conference, that would have been able to be enough. So, he just never did that. That was never his focus. And so it was kind of frustrating as a fan sometimes in the early portions of the season. It was almost like basketball season started right around the first of the new year. Like, that's whenever everything kind of got serious. So I don't like that. And I don't like the lack of postseason success that, we didn't see. Now, if he wins that other championship, Conference USA championship, the year before they ended up winning it, that's a different story. I mean, we look at D'Antoni completely differently. I mean, we'd probably be like, oh man, I mean, yeah, how could we ever get rid of it? He's back-to-back Conference USA champion and different things. The entire narrative of him would be very different than even what it is. So for those two reasons, not being able to see a lot of postseason success other than that one season, and then the fact that there was slow starts, that's my only takeaways that are negative. But everything else, I mean, it's just completely positive. Nobody loved Marshall like D'Antoni did. Nobody invested his time, talent, energy into it. He didn't need this job. He didn't have to take this job. He desired it. And you could tell that because, everything that he did, rather if you agreed with it or not, was to try his best in his version to embed Marshall overall in the basketball program. So something that Marshall is forever indebted in is Dan D'Antoni. And if there ever comes a day to which that we see like a new basketball arena or something, then in all reality, we ought to be able to call it the D'Antoni Arena at bare minimum, even if it's just for Mike and Dan. But for Dan, just in general, he deserves that kind of praise. He really does, because his playing career, his coaching career, he's just a Marshall guy through and through, and nobody ever is going to be like him ever again. It will not happen.
Nope, he's a one of one. I mean, just his whole story of getting back to Marshall. He was hired at 66 years old. I mean, what are the odds that you go out and hire a guy at 66 years old? And not only is the guy the most youthful 66-year-old at that time that you've probably ever seen, he just was insane how much energy he had, his style of play that he played with, and just some of the things that he did, man, just were really, really, really out there. I mean, nobody saw exactly what was coming. Like, you might have expected one thing or another, but you did not really know how the final product was going to be. And more times than not, the Herd was in good shape with Dan D'Antoni. And as far as my overall grade, I'm very close to yours. I went with a B plus. I'm very close to yours. The only reason that I give it a B plus is because of those 2 out of those last 3 years were just rocky. They just were. That was so unfortunate to see. And, I talked about those 6 years that he was above 500, which sounds like a low bar, but for Marshall basketball, a program that had over the last number of decades has really struggled with consistency, that was a big thing to do that. Outside of those 6 years where he was 117 and 78, the other years outside of that, 60 and 70. So there was definitely some ups and downs there, but you would expect the first year to be down just because it was a rebuild. But then like I said, 2 of those last 3 years, I mean, you're in year 8 at that point, and year 10, you should not be going 12-21. You should not be going 13-20. That just should not happen. But unfortunately it did. So that's kind of what knocks him down to a B+. But as far as somebody, like I said, as far as somebody that was perfect for Marshall, like you were talking about as well, that was somebody that was going to embrace Marshall at every turn, somebody that was going to just be a great ambassador for the program, for the university. Couldn't have gotten anybody better, because he stuck it out. He stayed there. He was the guy. He was the guy that needed to be hired when he was hired. He was the guy that needed to be there during those years. And it worked out very well for the Herd more times than not. Yeah, it wasn't all great. There were some down years, especially 2 down years. The 1 down year, you can just kind of chalk it up as he didn't have much to start with. But those two of those 3 last years is what really kind of soured it. Like if he had even in that last year, if he had a better year, if he was like above 500, he might still be the coach. Who knows? I mean, you don't know what could have happened, but it is what it is. It turned out the way it turned out, and he leaves a great legacy behind as a Marshall basketball coach and player, of course. So regardless, you can, like I said it, and I'm gonna say it again. You could disagree with his style and disagree with his methods and certain things. Marshall legend through and through. He's always going to be that. So there's no other way to describe it than that. And I gave him a B+. I think that's still a very good. If you have a coach for 10 plus years and you have him a B+, you did a pretty good job. So that's what I'm going with. But with that being said, we've pretty much hit on it all. I mean, that's 10 years of ups, downs, middles, everything else. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there with that era. And I'm excited to see the other eras coming up. We're going to just keep working back, beyond Dan. Probably, so I guess next week will be Tom Harrion, which should be very interesting. He had quite a memorable 4 years, some good, some bad, but we're going to get into that. But that should be cool. So we'll see. But unless you got anything else to add, man, we're finished.
I'm good. Go Herd.
All right, man. So I guess we'll get next week. We'll be looking at you, Tom Harrion. We're going to talk about those 4 years that he was the head coach, because there's a lot there, a lot of players to talk about with those 4 years, a lot of just everything, lots of stuff to talk about. So looking forward to that one. Hope you all enjoyed this one. Our first basketball coach episode. We're going to get plenty more to come. So go Herd. We'll see y'all later.